I first came across the story when I read The Djinn in the Nightingale's Eye. It was a short story or novella written by A.S. Byatt, and when I read it, I found it quite exceptional because somehow, in a compact way, it seemed to probe all the mysteries and paradoxes of life, or many of them. And it was a story that hung around in the back of my mind for such a long time until one day it occurred to me it should be a film. I think for me, what was most important is that, like Fury Road, I felt the kind of. I approach stories a little bit like people used to use Geiger counters to find out where the intense radiation was. Is there a seam of story to mine here? Is there something sort of attractive that might have a lot of narrative energy? And that's, I think, what the two stories have in common. There's a lot below decks, as I like to say. There's a lot of iceberg under the tip. And yet my hope is that that's apparent or evident to the audience. This is a story of a woman who's very rational. And she encounters a jinn or a genie who gives her 3 wishes in exchange for his freedom. The problem is that she's someone perfectly content with life. And secondly, she's a narratologist, someone who studies stories and knows that all stories about wishing are cautionary tales. So he has to persuade her by telling his own stories about being trapped in a bottle for over 3,000 years. And eventually she does make a wish, and it kind of surprises both of them. I called her Tildaness, and she brings so much as a human being, as an artist, and I was lucky enough to join that club of directors who work with her over and over again. I've only had one taste of it, but I know all those great directors she keeps working with. I know why, because there's something absolutely unique and magnificent about her. Like Tilda, I'd seen him in other roles, but meeting him in person was another thing. And the moment I saw him, he was the jinn. I don't know why. Subsequently, I've been able to sort of try to figure it out. And I think it's to do with his, apart from his skill as an actor, like actors are like athletes, they have the natural talent and the skill is evident on the screen. But apart from that is that question of charisma. And charisma is kind of paradoxical because on the one hand, you've got somebody who's very accessible. You almost can be their best friend, or you have this feeling that they can be your best friend. On the other hand, they're amazingly mysterious. And that kind of conflict, that paradox, I think, is one of the essences of charisma. So both those things are what's inherent in the character of the jinn, and that's how that's how once again I'm really, really grateful to have him playing the jinn. Even in the simplest, most fantasy-driven fable, there is truth. I think that's why we tell stories. That's why the way we communicate deep and deep philosophical and psychological issues to our children, we do it through stories. I learned that by making films about dancing penguins and talking pigs, and they have a lot of truth in them. And now here's another version of them. The reason why a film like this should be seen in a cinema is because, first of all, when we go to the cinema, it's a kind of public dreaming. and stories, and particularly allegorical stories like this, are a kind of dream. You're invited into the dream, and hopefully you're caught up into it. So just on that level, it's something to share with strangers on the big screen. On a purely technical level, we work so hard on the vision and the imagery and what you're experiencing. We work so hard on the sound and the music and bringing that sonic landscape and bringing the two together. And we work so hard on trying to tell a story that keeps you leaning forward in your seat.
My story is true.
孤独を愛する学者アリシアの小瓶から飛び出したのは魔人だった。
What is your heart's desire?